Hello friends, good evening and welcome to another session of Tech Tablet Daily Dose. In today's session, we would be looking at the ABAP questions of that is the part 2. We have already covered some questions in part 1, so today we would be looking at some more questions in part 2. I just had to take some time out just to understand if my first video was or is helpful at least to a few or not, and now that I have a feeling that it is being helpful at least for a few, I here come up with another video that is part 2. So we will be looking at another set of questions today that are frequently asked, and to come up with this, the first question that we have is, what are the types of size categories and data classes available? Now there are 5 size categories and it is not from 1, it is from 0 to 4, and we have 11 data classes, of which we generally use 3 for most of the application tables or be it anything. Now it is APPL 0, 1 and 2. Now 0 is for master data, 1 is for transaction and 2 is for organizational data, right? And the other 2 types are user and user 1. Now this is used when you have this for customers own development. So these are hardly used. We generally use APPL 0, 1 and 2. And then coming on the second question, we have what events do we have in module pool programming? We have 4 events: PBO, PAI, POV, POH. Module pool for me personally has been quite a difficult experience, but yet as an ABAPer it is a must and should that we should have a good understanding on module pool as well. So in module pool we have 4 events. To start with, we have process before output, process after input, process on value request and help request. Now value request and help request can be triggered when you press F4 and F1 respectively, right? And then on the third question we have, what should be the approach for writing a BDC program? Now this is quite often asked in most of the interviews because BDC program is quite important. Now when we do this, we first analyze the data from local file, like from wherever you are importing it, and then you analyze the transaction also, after which you declare the internal tables which are being used, and then you transfer this data that is being used from the local file to your internal table, and finally you populate your BDC data using either of the methods, which is call transaction method or a session method. Right, now let us take a look at what is batch input session. Right, now this is firstly a method of data transfer wherein data is transferred from the internal table to the database, right? And this happens in sessions. Now what is a session? Session is nothing but an intermediate step. It is just like a process or something which happens between internal tables and the database table, and unless one session is processed, the data is not set to be transferred to the database table, or it actually does not happen. Fine. And in the next question we have, what is an interactive report and what is the difference between this report when you compare it with a classical type of report, right? So we'll be looking at two definitions or understanding 2 concepts. One, what is interactive reporting, and classical reporting. Now interactive reporting is also called as a drill down report. Now what happens in this is it allows the user to retrieve or to present the data at every level or at any point that he is required to find the data precisely at during the session, and it also gives a basic list from which user can use for any detailed information by positioning the cursor. Like now if there is one point of information that I'm looking for, I can just click on that to find what it is, right? But when it comes to classical reporting, then it is a big list which has a lot of data. Right, now even if I do not want to see it, I would have to see it because it is a classical reporting. And interactive reporting being much more user friendly, I can just go to whatever I want and see whatever it is required. So that is the reason why it is also called as a drill down report. Then we have, what is the difference between add selection screen and add selection screen output? Now one is process after input and the other is the output. So at selection screen only is the process after input of selection, right? And at selection screen output is the PBO, which is process before output for the same selection screen. Now this is where we use PAI and PBO in module pool programming, right? Then we have, what do you mean by BDC? Batch Data Communication Programming. Now this is generally used for uploading mass data. When you have a whole lot of bulk data that you want to load into your SAP system, then you use BDC method for that. Now what are its uses and why did BDC actually come into existence, or what is the actual purpose of BDC is what we would be looking at. Now to talk of the typical use or the exact use that it does is, it brings a whole chunk or a whole lot of information in one go, right? Now that is in one import from any background or from any system into the newly working SAP R3 framework. And you can also process data in a periodic manner if you're looking for such from your external or your other system, which is like in wherever you have your data right now, to the SAP system. Right now, why do we use BDC? We use BDC because now whenever we are updating data from any background or maybe any system or any external system, we do not do it directly because there definitely would be a lot of inconsistency, right? So that is the reason why, to ensure data consistency in the SAP system at least, we upload the data through a very similar programming, and that is BDC. So what it does is, it works by simulating the user input from transactional screen by an ABAP program. And this ABAP program is what you do in your BDC to ensure that your data is populated or your data is brought from the external system to your SAP landscape. Then we have, what is the difference between add selection screen and add selection screen output? This is nothing but we have the PAI of the selection screen, which is the process after input, and then we have add selection screen output, which is process before output. So these work, one is for the input and the other is for the output respectively, right? Then what is the difference between SAP memory and ABAP memory? This is quite often asked, another question that I have come across a couple of times when I was giving my interview. Now when we talk of SAP memory, this is completely user specific. Now what I mean by user specific is, the data that is stored in SAP memory, it can be accessed at any point, right, from any session. And if like you can use your set parameters and get parameters. Now all these, when being used, your SAP memory is the one which is acting behind. Now when you talk of ABAP memory, now this is user and transaction specific as well, which means that you can access this data in that respective session, and when you go to another session, this memory would not be accessed there. And this is used when we are using export or import statements in any of the programming, right? So this is where the difference between SAP memory and ABAP memory lies. ABAP memory is like on the go. Once you are off the session, your memory is not retrieved the same. You have a new memory coming in according to your transaction entered. And then on the 10th question, we have, what is the difference between call transaction method and session method in BDC programming? This is another important question, which is a very high prioritized question, I would say. Now if you talk of the session method, it is used when you have huge volumes of data. Vis-a-vis call transaction is used when the data volume is considerably low. Session method is slow as you compare to call transaction. Call transaction is faster, obviously. And then you have, talking of session method, now the SAP database is updated in session method whenever a session or a process is complete, right? And this is done separately or not in that similar session via T-code SM35. But when we talk of call transaction method, it is updated during the transaction of the program, or during the batch input program. Like whenever you have this transaction, then you also the execution of the transaction, then you have your SAP database updated. And the last difference is, errors are automatically handled during the processing of batch inputs. Now when you do a session method, your errors are handled, right? You have an error log that you can see. But when you talk of call transaction, then your errors should be handled during the programming level. So this differences that are spotted out here are some differences between call transaction and session method. So I hope you have learned something more from today's session. All that you have to do is just stay subscribed to this channel if you're looking for more. I hope this has been of some help and you have enjoyed the session as well. Stay tuned to Tech Tablet for many more videos like these yet to be covered and a lot of knowledge yet to be exchanged. Thank you. You have a great day.